On Becoming a Person, A Therapist's View of Psychotherapy by Carl R. Rogers. Have you ever felt like you were humming a melody that only you could hear? A song bubbling up from somewhere deep inside that felt completely true, yet somehow strange and maybe even a little embarrassing? There was once a woman, a troubled homemaker named Mrs. Oak, who felt exactly this way. In her therapy sessions, she described this sensation of a song without music, words flowing naturally from her, but which she immediately second-guessed. "Maybe you're just making this up," a doubtful voice whispered in her head. She felt torn between a part of herself that desperately wanted to be whole and authentic, and another part insisting she was just adding chaos to an already chaotic world. She was terrified to let that song be heard, convinced there was no place in the world for the person she really was. This woman's struggle is, in so many ways, the struggle of every one of us. It's that quiet, persistent question humming beneath the surface of our busy lives. Who am I, really? And how can I actually become that person? Today we're diving into one of the most profound answers to that question, found in a book that sold millions of copies and quietly revolutionized how we think about ourselves. The book is On Becoming a Person by Carl R. Rogers. Now, Carl Rogers wasn't your typical psychology heavyweight. He wasn't a dark, brooding intellectual from Vienna like Freud. He was a farm boy from the American Midwest, raised in a strict, hard-working family where even drinking soda felt slightly sinful. He started out studying scientific agriculture, learning about control groups and experimental methods from a book called Feeds and Feeding. But a trip to China in his youth cracked his worldview wide open. He realized that sincere, honest people could believe radically different things, and for the first time, he freed himself from his parents' way of thinking. This journey eventually led him away from the ministry and into the messy, unpredictable world of psychotherapy. When Rogers published On Becoming a Person in 1961, he thought he was writing for fellow therapists. He was shocked to discover he was writing for everyone: nurses, housewives, business executives, teachers. The book became a cultural phenomenon because it spoke to a universal hunger, the hunger to be understood, to be accepted, and to be real. In this summary, I'm going to share the secret Carl Rogers discovered over 33 years of deeply listening to thousands of people in distress. It's a secret about the one relationship that has the power to unlock your full potential and set you free. By the end of our time together, you won't just understand what it means to become a person. You'll have a roadmap to begin that journey yourself. You'll learn how to drop the masks you wear, how to trust the wisdom of your own experience, and how to find the courage to be that self which you truly are. So let's begin this journey and explore the profound, surprisingly simple art of becoming. Have you ever felt like you're playing a character in your own life? Like you're wearing a mask, and you're secretly terrified that if you ever take it off, people might not like what they see? Or worse, that there might be nothing underneath at all? This feeling, this quiet fear of being exposed as a fraud, is one of the most common human experiences. We learn it early. We learn to be the good child, the smart student, the easygoing friend, the tough professional. We build these facades to face the world, and we do it for one very simple reason. We desperately want to be loved and accepted. One young woman in therapy described it perfectly. She said she'd developed a talent for being the, quote, appeaser, the oil that smoothed troubled waters. At parties or small meetings, she would argue against her own beliefs if she sensed they might upset someone important. She'd done it for so long, she told her therapist, that she wasn't even sure she had any real convictions left to stand up for. She said, "I haven't been really honestly being myself, or actually knowing what my real self is, and I've been just playing a sort of false role." This is the central problem Carl Rogers saw in nearly every person who walked through his office door. They were living lives that weren't truly their own. They were following scripts written by others, parents, teachers, society. They were living a life of shoulds. I should be a better son. I should be more successful. I should be less emotional. I should be what my boss expects me to be. Some people even feel they should be bad. One young man discovered he'd lived his whole life with the deep-seated belief that being ashamed of himself was the most appropriate way to feel. It was the only way he knew how to get any self-respect, by agreeing with the disapproval he felt from the world. He was moving away from what others expected, just as much as the young woman tired of being a doormat. Whether we're trying to be perfect or pleasing, good or bad, the core problem is the same. We're living a life defined from the outside in, not from the inside out. We're trying to force our experiences into a pre-approved shape, cutting off or denying any part of ourselves that doesn't fit that mold. And the energy this takes is absolutely exhausting. Another client described it with a beautiful metaphor. She said it was like trying to hold together a jigsaw puzzle with all the pieces in the wrong place. The more pieces you force into the wrong spots, the more effort it takes to keep them there, until you're so tired that even the chaos of letting go feels better than continuing to hold on. So what happens when you finally let go? What happens when you find yourself in a space where you don't have to pretend anymore? This is where Roger's great discovery begins. He found that when you create a certain kind of relationship, a relationship of deep safety and freedom, something remarkable happens. People don't fall apart. They don't become monsters. They begin to move. And they all move in the same direction. They move toward becoming more themselves. They begin hesitantly and fearfully to take off the masks. This is the start of the journey of becoming a person. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about finally, courageously becoming the person you already are. So what is this transformative relationship that makes such a profound journey possible? It's not magic. It's something we're all capable of, yet it's incredibly rare. Roger spent his life trying to understand its essential ingredients, and he distilled it down to 3 core conditions. If these 3 things are present, whether in therapy, friendship, family, or a classroom, growth will happen. The first condition is what he called congruence, or genuineness. Think about the most trustworthy person you know. When they speak, you feel like you're hearing the real person. Their words match their feelings. Their tone matches their words. They aren't performing a role. They're the same on the inside as they are on the outside. This is congruence. An infant is a perfect example. When a baby is hungry, he is hungry all the way through. His visceral experience, his awareness, and his communication, the crying, are all perfectly aligned. There's no doubt in our minds that he's genuinely experiencing hunger. He's transparent. Now think of an adult. A man in a heated discussion insists, "I'm not angry, I'm just pointing out the logical facts," while his face is flushed and his finger is jabbing the air. This is incongruence. His words are saying one thing, but his body and tone are screaming another. His communication is ambiguous, and we instinctively feel wary. We don't know where he really stands because, in that moment, he doesn't know where he stands. He's hiding his anger even from himself. For a therapist or for anyone in a helping relationship, being congruent means being real. It means you're aware of your own feelings, and you're willing to be them in the relationship. You're not hiding behind a professional facade of the expert or the doctor. If you feel bored, you're aware you feel bored. If you feel warmth, you feel it. If you feel annoyed, you accept that feeling in yourself. Rogers found that this genuineness is the first and most important condition. Because only by providing the genuine reality that is in you can the other person successfully seek the reality in themselves. You can't ask someone to take off their mask if you're still wearing yours. The second condition is unconditional positive regard or acceptance. This sounds complicated, but it's one of the simplest and most powerful forces in human existence. It means caring for another person in a way that isn't possessive and doesn't demand anything in return. It's a feeling of "I care for you," not "I care for you if you are this way or that way." It's the kind of acceptance that allows someone to be whatever they are in that moment: confused, fearful, angry, proud, or ashamed. It's a deep appreciation of them as a person of worth, no matter their behavior or feelings. Most of the love we experience in life is conditional. Parents love their children more when they're well-behaved. Teachers value students who are smart and obedient. We're accepted by our friends when we're fun and agreeable. We're constantly being judged, so we learn to hide the parts of ourselves we fear will be disapproved of. Unconditional positive regard creates a climate of profound psychological safety. It says, you can be your real self here, and you won't be rejected. You can show me the feelings you're ashamed of, and I won't turn away. When Mrs. M, the young wife we met earlier, finally confessed her past to her husband, she was terrified he would find her repulsive. Instead, he was understanding. He accepted her. And in that moment of acceptance, she said, I trust him. I'm not afraid now to tell him those silly little, illogical feelings that keep popping into my head. Her husband's acceptance didn't just make her feel better. It allowed her to start accepting herself. It dissolved the barrier she'd built between them and between her and her own experience. This is why acceptance is so transformative. It doesn't mean you have to approve of someone's actions. It means you accept the person behind the actions. It's a willingness for them to be a separate individual with their own unique feelings. It's a profound way of saying, you're free to be you. The third and final condition is empathic understanding. This is the ability to see the world through the other person's eyes, to sense their private world as if it were your own, but without ever losing the as-if quality. It's not the same as sympathy, which is feeling for someone. Empathy is feeling with someone. It's not about saying, I understand what's wrong with you, or I went through the same thing. Those are evaluations from the outside. Empathic understanding is about trying to grasp what the world feels like from the inside. It's about sensing the personal meaning an experience has for them. When someone is angry, it's about sensing the hurt that might lie beneath that anger. When someone is bragging, it's about sensing the insecurity that might be driving it. It's about listening not just to the words, but to the feelings behind the words. Rogers found that this kind of understanding is incredibly rare. Our first reaction to most statements is to judge or evaluate. We think, that's right, or that's wrong, that's foolish, or that's brilliant. We almost never allow ourselves to simply understand precisely what the meaning of that statement is to the person who's saying it. Why? Because understanding is risky. If you let yourself truly understand another person, you might be changed by that understanding, and we all fear change. But when someone feels truly understood, a powerful process is unlocked. They feel safe enough to explore the hidden corners of their own experience. As they talk, and as the listener reflects back their feelings, it sounds like you feel hurt by that, or it seems you're feeling really confused. They begin to hear themselves more clearly. This is one of the most powerful tools in therapy. An expert therapist, Rogers found, doesn't give advice or clever interpretations. They simply reflect the client's feelings with precision and generous tentativeness. This act of being heard allows the client to go deeper, to explore further, and to find their own insights. So there they are, genuineness, acceptance, and empathy. When these three conditions are present, Rogers believed, constructive personality change will invariably occur. This isn't just theory, it's a hypothesis tested by decades of research. But what is the process of this change? How does a person move from being a rigid, defensive facade to a fluid, open, authentic person? It's a journey that unfolds in stages, a slow melting of the frozen parts of ourselves. Rogers described this as a continuum, a process of becoming. The journey begins in a state of fixity, a place where feelings are unrecognized and unowned. A person at this stage doesn't communicate about themselves, only about externals. They see their problems as being outside of them. Disorganization just keeps cropping up in my life, they might say, as if it's a weather pattern they have no control over. They talk about their feelings as if they're past objects. The symptom was depression. Not I feel depressed, but the symptom. It's a remote, alien thing. At this stage, there's no desire to change, because there's no recognition that the problem is internal. But if this person encounters a relationship where they feel truly received, a slight loosening begins. They might start to talk about themselves as an object. I try hard to be perfect because I want her to love me. Or they might talk about their self as a reflection of others. I can feel myself smiling sweetly the way my mother does. Feelings are still described as being in the past and are often seen as shameful or bad. There's a recognition of contradictions, but not much concern about them. I want to know things, but I look at the same page for an hour. As the feeling of safety deepens, they enter a new stage. Feelings in the present start to break through, almost against their will. A client might be talking about something else entirely, and then suddenly say, "Oh, all right, I don't trust you." There's a growing fear of this immediacy. One client described it as a "not somewhere inside of me. It makes me want to get mad, and cry, and run away." They're getting closer to their real experience, and it's frightening. They begin to question the rigid ways they've seen the world. Another client said, "Humor has been my bulwark all my life. Maybe it's a little out of place in trying to really look at myself." In that moment, he felt the ground shake as one of his core defenses began to crumble. This leads to the next phase, where feelings are expressed much more freely in the present. They quote, bubble up or seep through, despite the fear. A client might be talking, and a pained, stricken look comes over her face. She starts to cry. "I don't know," she says. "I must have been getting a little too close to something I didn't want to talk about." The feeling has broken through her defenses. In this stage, people start to develop a desire to be the real me. One man said, "The real truth of the matter is that I'm not the sweet, forbearing guy that I try to make out that I am. I get irritated. I feel like being selfish, and I don't know why I should pretend I'm not that way." He's starting to own all the parts of his experience. Then comes a crucial, often dramatic, turning point. This is the moment of full experiencing. A feeling that has been stuck, inhibited, or denied is now experienced with complete immediacy. It flows to its full result. The person doesn't just feel about the feeling, they are the feeling. In these moments, the self as an object disappears. The self is the experience. Remember the young man who was talking about his fear of failing? As he explored that feeling, it led him deeper, to a feeling of pleading. He found himself putting his hands together as if in prayer. "Won't you do this for me?" he said, acting out the feeling. And then, the shock of recognition. "Oh, that's terrible." "Who? Me? Beg." In that moment, he wasn't talking about his dependency. For a brief, wondrous, and terrifying instant, he was his dependency. He was a pleading little boy. He said afterward, "I just don't know myself." Here's suddenly something I never realized, hadn't any inkling of. These moments are often accompanied by physiological release. Tears, sighs, muscular relaxation. It's as if a dam has broken. Rogers believed these moments are almost irreversible. Once an experience is fully felt and accepted into awareness, it can be integrated. The person is no longer fighting it. They've become more whole. This leads to the final stage of the process, a stage that often happens as much outside of therapy as in it. The person begins to live in a new way. They trust their own organismic process. New feelings are experienced with richness and immediacy, and they're used as a reliable guide for behavior. The person becomes what Rogers calls a fully functioning person. So what does this person who emerges from the journey look like? What are the characteristics of this good life they're moving toward? First, they have an increasing openness to experience. This is the polar opposite of defensiveness. They're less rigid in their perceptions. They don't need to distort reality to fit a preconceived picture of themselves. They can see that not all men are stern fathers, not all women are rejecting mothers. They can take in the evidence of a new situation as it actually is, rather than twisting it to fit a pattern. This openness applies to their inner world as well. They're more able to listen to themselves. They can feel their pain when they're in pain. They can feel their joy when they're joyful. They can feel love for their child without the nagging feeling that they should feel it. They're living more closely to the raw data of their own organism. Second, they live a more existential life. This means living fully in each moment. For a person who is open to their experience, each moment is new. They aren't trying to cram and twist their life into a preformed structure. The self and personality emerge from experience, rather than experience being forced to fit the self. They're a participant in, and an observer of, the ongoing process of their own life, rather than trying to be the rigid controller of it. They're a fluid process, a flowing river of change, not a solid block of material. Third, they have an increasing trust in their organism. This is one of the most radical ideas. They come to discover that their own organism is a trustworthy instrument for discovering the most satisfying behavior in each situation. When faced with a choice, they don't just rely on rules or what others think. They have access to all the available data, their own complex feelings, the social demands, their memories of similar situations. And they're able to let their total organism, with their conscious mind participating, weigh and balance all these factors and discover the course of action that feels right. Rogers compared this to a giant electronic computing machine. Because the person is open to all of their experience, all the data is fed into the machine without distortion. The machine then quickly computes the most economical and satisfying path. Most of us make errors because we feed in bad data, we deny our real feelings, or we treat old memories as if they're present reality. But the fully functioning person finds their organism to be a reliable guide. They're less afraid of their own emotions because they've learned that their feelings, when experienced fully and in context with all their other feelings, operate in a constructive harmony. Finally, they develop an internal locus of evaluation. They increasingly feel that the center of judgment lies within themselves. They look less and less to others for approval or disapproval, for standards to live by. They recognize that it rests within themselves to choose, and that the only question that truly matters is, am I living in a way which is deeply satisfying to me and which truly expresses me? This is a frighteningly responsible freedom. One young woman, as she realized she couldn't depend on anyone else to give her an education, that she would have to get it herself, said, "I have all the symptoms of fright. It really seems like I'm cut loose." But along with the fear, she felt a surging up, or force, or outlet, something really big and strong. This is the feeling of becoming your own person. So to be that self, which one truly is, means being a process of becoming, a process of listening to the complex harmony of feelings within, of trusting that inner wisdom, and of having the courage to live from that authentic core. But what about the beast in man? If we just listen to ourselves, won't we become selfish, evil, destructive? This is the fear every client has. If I let these feelings out, it will be a catastrophe. Rogers' experience taught him the opposite. He came to believe that the innermost core of man's nature is positive. He argued that when an individual is open to all of his experience, he is naturally social. He has hostile impulses, yes, but he also has deep desires for connection, for tenderness, for friendship. He has selfish desires, but also a sensitive concern for others. When all of these are allowed into awareness, they find a natural, constructive balance. He uses the example of a lion. We think of the lion as a ravening beast. But the lion only kills when he's hungry. He doesn't go on a rampage. He cares for and protects his young. He is, in a basic sense, a trustworthy member of his species. Rogers suggests that when a human being is truly and deeply a member of the human species, not a warped, defensive, fearful version, he too is a constructive and trustworthy process. The tragedy for most of us is that our defenses keep us from being aware of this inner rationality. We're moving in one direction consciously while our organism is trying to move in another. The good life is the process of resolving that conflict, of becoming a unified, integrated whole. This perspective has profound implications, not just for our own lives, but for everything we do. In family life, it means moving away from pretense and toward realness. It means expressing our feelings, positive and negative, as they arise, as our feelings, not as accusations. To say, "I feel annoyed when you do that," is a fact about your experience. To say, "What you are doing is wrong," is a judgment that invites conflict. When we're open and real, we become less defensive, and we can truly listen to the other person. We can create a family where each member is free to be a separate, unique person, bound together not by rigid roles but by real feelings and mutual understanding. In education, it means shifting the focus from teaching to facilitating learning. Rogers came to believe that anything that can be taught to another is relatively inconsequential. The only learning that significantly influences behavior is self-discovered, self-appropriated learning. A teacher's job, then, isn't to be a dispenser of facts, but a creator of a climate where the student feels free to be curious, to make mistakes, to pursue questions that are relevant to them. A climate of genuineness, acceptance, and empathic understanding. In such a climate, students don't need to be forced to learn. The natural, self-actualizing tendency takes over. They want to learn, to grow, to master, to create. And what about creativity itself? Rogers believed the creative process springs from the same root as personal growth, the tendency to actualize oneself. The conditions that foster creativity are the same conditions that foster a healthy personality. Psychological safety, created by accepting the individual as having unconditional worth and refraining from external evaluation. And psychological freedom, the freedom to play, to explore, to juggle ideas, to be yourself without fear. Ultimately, this way of being, this process of becoming, is a choice. In our modern world, the behavioral sciences are giving us ever-increasing power to predict and control human behavior. We can select people who will conform. We can create conditions that increase productivity. We can manipulate people through appeals to their unconscious desires. We could, if we chose, build a scientifically managed society, a Walden II or a Brave New World. But Rogers offers another path. We can choose to use our growing knowledge not to control, but to free. We can choose to value man as a process of becoming. We can create the conditions of freedom and trust that in that freedom, individuals will become more self-responsible, more creative, and more realistically social. This is the great paradox. Science assumes that all behavior is determined by prior causes. Yet our deepest experience as human beings is that of responsible, personal choice. To deny the science is to be closed-minded, but to deny our subjective experience of freedom is, in Rogers' view, equally stifling. We have to live with both. We have to recognize that the human person, with his capacity for subjective choice, will always exist prior to and separate from any of his scientific undertakings. The goals we select, the purposes we wish to follow, must always be our own. And so we come back to the central question: who are you, really? And how can you become that person? The answer that echoes through all of Carl Rogers' work is this: you don't become that person by striving or forcing or following a set of rules. You become that person by creating a space, for yourself and for others, of such safety and acceptance that the person who is already there, behind all the masks and all the shoulds, finally has the courage to step out. As we come to the end of our journey through On Becoming a Person, it's worth taking a moment to reflect on just how radical these ideas are. Even today, we live in a world that is, in many ways, the opposite of the one Carl Rogers describes. It's a world of external evaluation. Our value is measured in likes, in grades, in job titles, in the approval of others. We're constantly pressured to conform, to present a polished facade, to become an organization man or a brand. In this context, Rogers' core message is more than just a psychological theory. It's an act of quiet rebellion, The idea that the most important journey is the one inward, that the highest authority is your own experience, and that your deepest nature is trustworthy. This is a profound challenge to the way most of us live. The most powerful and immediately useful takeaway from this book, I believe, is the simple listening experiment Rogers proposes. The next time you're in a disagreement, just stop the discussion and institute this rule. Each person can speak up for himself only after he has first restated the ideas and feelings of the previous speaker accurately, and to that speaker's satisfaction. Try it. You'll find it's one of the most difficult things you've ever done. It takes immense courage to truly enter another person's world without judgment, because in doing so, you risk being changed yourself. But if you can do it, you'll find the emotion draining out of the argument. The differences will shrink, and what remains will be a real human connection. You'll have created, for a brief moment, the kind of relationship that allows for growth. This is the essence of Rogers' philosophy. The good life is not a destination. It's not a state of being happy or adjusted or fulfilled. It is a process. It is a direction. It is the journey of becoming. It is a life for the courageous, not the faint-hearted, because it involves the stretching and growing of becoming more and more of your potentialities. It means launching yourself fully into the stream of life. The deeply exciting thing about being human, Rogers discovered, is that when we are inwardly free, this is the path we choose. We choose to be real. We choose to grow. We choose to become. That was a summary of On Becoming a Person by Carl R. Rogers. We've explored the central currents of this incredible book today, but I'll be honest with you. A summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. The map can show you the landmarks and the general shape of the land, but it can never replace the feeling of walking the paths yourself. The real magic of this book happens in the quiet moments when a particular story or a simple phrase connects with your own experience in a way you didn't expect. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about has resonated with you, I wholeheartedly encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself and the world around you. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please take a moment to click that like button and subscribe to the Billionaire's Bookshelf. It tells us that we're on the right track and ensures you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book. Let's keep growing together.